This is a video on Isaiah 53 in Hebrew. The actual chapter starts in Isaiah 52:13. In Hebrew, you go by something called a Samex marker. The Samex is used to close a chapter. So the next verse after the marker begins a new chapter. The Samex is in Isaiah 52:12. So 52:13 begins what we call Isaiah 53 in Hebrew. And the verses that means there are 3 more verses that belong in the chapter. So I'm going to read each verse, and then I'm going to explain what each of the words means. And then at the end of the video, it's probably going to end up being in 3 parts. I'm going to read the whole chapter in Hebrew, and then I'm going to read the poetic translation I made out of it, because I like to try to match Isaiah's meter. So we're starting now at Isaiah 52:13, and in Hebrew, I'm reading now directly from the Hebrew in BibleWorks. I'm going to read it out loud. I've not had a chance to practice Hebrew with anybody, so if my pronunciation sounds off, it's going to be off compared to modern Israeli Hebrew anyway. But if it sounds off, that's going to be why. Because I'm reading it directly. Here's Isaiah 52:13. Chine, yaskil avdi yarum, v'nisa, v'gavach, ma'od. Okay. First word is chine. That is an interjection. It means look, pay attention. And it's usually translated behold, which is not really good in English for it. It's like, look here. So it grabs you. Okay, yaskil is the hifil imperfect, third person singular, of sakal. Sakal means that through understanding, through mastery of knowledge, you prosper. So really, you need all those words to translate yaskil. But unfortunately, in the English translations of the Bible and most of the others I can find and read in other languages, they just say prosper, and that's totally misleading. It's through mastery of knowledge he will prosper. Cal imperfect is used as a predictive tense. It means something that's not yet finished. You've really got, in the cal is the tense of reality, and you've got basically the perfect and the imperfect. Perfect means something that's completed, or contemplated as being completed in the verse. And the imperfect means not completed either at the time that the verse is spoken or at the time with reference to whatever the topic is in view. So you would really translate that, look, he will prosper by means of mastery of knowledge. Okay, and then the next word is avdi. The I ending is first person singular, meaning my, and then avad means servant. It's pronounced with a V sound, even though it's spelled with a B sound. It's spelled like A-B-A-D, but the B is really a V. There's no dagish in there. So avdi means my servant. So you have chine, look, yaskil, by means of his knowledge, he will prosper. And then the he is my servant, avdi. Yarum is a really interesting verb. It's the cal imperfect of rum. Now, rum is, in your lexicons and stuff, is always talking about it being high, being lofty, but that's not what's in view here. It's the rising up, which is the root meaning of rum. Rum is related to kum, which means be established. But here it's talking about rising up. It's talking about the incarnation. Okay, the action of rising up, of coming to the defense, of coming to the aid here of Israel. And it's in the cal imperfect because it hasn't happened yet. And avdi is the actor of the verb, my servant being Christ. Yarum. Ya is the prefix that you put on the verb rum to make it into a cal imperfect. Just like ya was the prefix that you put on sakal to turn it into yaskil to make it imperfect, but it's in the hifil there. Okay, Hebrew is an extremely varied language. There's a lot of irregularity to the verbs. They're not really irregular. They're just so many different formations of verbs. So here you've got room. The default, of course, is the cal perfect in the third person singular. And that's happening here. Ya being put on the as a prefix to make it cal imperfect is Isaiah's way of doing wordplay. Because Yah, of course, is the one that's going to make the rising up occur. It's one of his many clever ways of stating God-man. Isaiah is just so genius with the way he uses words. Because he just mentioned Abdi, my servant, my slave son. Okay, because Abdi also means son, besides slave. My son, my slave, Avad. So since he just did that, now he's going to use Yarum instead of just room or some other way he could have phrased it. He uses Yarum because Yah is the prefix of God. You see the cleverness there? I'm sorry, I'm smiling too much. Okay. So room is in the cal imperfect, so it's Yarum. And now we go to the next part of the sentence. Okay, wa means and. Nisa. Okay, that is the nifal perfect. Now he's switching tenses. This is what's so important about this verse. He's switching tenses to the nifal perfect of nasa. Nasa is a key verb that Isaiah is going to use in chapter 53, so he's introducing it right away, typical Hebrew rhetorical style. Nasa is going to be the verb that carries the passage. And so that's what nasa means, to lift, carry, or take. And it's a primary verb in the Old Testament for lifting and carrying off and taking off of sins. So, I mean, immediately, Christians among us who remember the New Testament, Christ would be lifted up. The Old Testament where Moses talked about the snake, where the snake was put on a cross and lifted up. And when Israel, who was suffering from the snake venom bites that were sent to them when they rebelled in the wilderness, they would look up and that would heal them from the snake venom. Okay, so Isaiah writing, about not quite 1,000 years later, is playing on that. So that's why he's using one nisa, the end beginning, okay, to nasa, one nisa, actually, that's what makes it the nifal. Perfect. So notice how he's going from yaskil, which is the hifil is causative. He's going from the hifil imperfect of sakel, which is yaskil, to the cal imperfect yarum. All right. Then he switches to the nifal perfect. Okay, nifal is the passive voice, or sometimes it's reflexive, where somebody's doing the thing to you. Okay, so you would be translating nasa here, which is nisa in the nifal perfect. He will be carried up. So you see the funkiness of it. It's yarum. Okay, he rises up. God takes on humanity, rises up, and then the humanity is carried up. All right, lifted, carried, taken up for our sins, that you'll see later in the chapter. And that's the nifal perfect. I'm probably not saying this right. I'm so excited about this. Because you just cannot translate the chained tenses into English to show how it's talking about God-man. There's no way to translate that. You just have to explain it from directly from the Hebrew, like I'm trying to do here and probably doing badly. Okay, so then the next verb is, of course, is and again, and you've got gaveh. Okay, gaveh means to be high and exalted. You see how he's playing on highness, the Most High God? I don't know if you're getting it. I don't know. You got yarum, which is high. Nisa, lifted up on high. That's the humanity, what's going to be done to his humanity. And then gaveh is the result, being high, exalted. So the Most High, all right, becomes a slave son. Paul plays on this in Philippians 2, 7 through 10. So the Most High becomes a slave son, so it's coming down. And then Yah lifts him up. Yah, he raises up because he's God. Okay? And then he's raised up in his humanity too. So he's exalted most high in both his godness already and his humanity as a result of being Wanisa, raised up, lifted onto the cross. Now, how are you going to translate all that meaning into English? You can't. But it's there in the Hebrew, in the wordplay, in the tense switches, because Gaveh is in the Cal perfect. Remember, Cal is the tense of reality. All right, and it's in the perfect, which contemplates the future action of his resurrection, okay, as being completed. So it's Gaveh, okay? Well, Gaveh me'od. So here's the whole me'od, though I forgot to tell you what that means. Me'od, when the D doesn't have a dagesh in it, you have to say it like DTH, so it's me'od. Ma'od means vehemently, exceedingly, well, not forcefully like against your will, but strongest possible, vehemently is really the best way to put it. In fact, Theological Workbook of the Old Testament talks about it that way. There's strength and vehemence. Vehemence is really the best way to translate it, I would think. So that's how what you end up getting out of Ma'od. So Chine, Yaskil, Avdi, Yarum, Wanisa, Wagavech, Ma'od. Okay, now we'll go through each one of them. Chine, look, Yaskil, by mastery of knowledge he will prosper. Who is he? Avdi, my slave son. Yarum, will rise up. Okay? Wanisa, and will be lifted up, carried up, taken up. Wagavech, and will be made high, exalted, and will be high, exalted. It's not passive there. It's the Cal perfect of Gavech. Gavech. And Ma'od, vehemently. Okay? I'm so excited about this, I can't breathe. Okay, that was 12 minutes on just one verse. Okay, let's see what we can do with Isaiah 52:14. Okay, here's Isaiah 52:14. I'm going to first read it in Hebrew and then go through each of the words. Kasher shamu alika chavim ken mishchat meish merechu utoaro mid eni adam. Okay, Hebrew ka means like. It's spelled in a lot of different ways, but it basically means like, as. It's setting up a comparison, and it's often chained, and it is chained here, and you're going to see that in a minute. So the K, where it says ka asher, kasher, they concatenate it. Kasher, asher means who, he, who, and it's in the third person singular, I believe. Yeah, they don't use it that way. It's just a relative particle. But you tell by context who it means. Okay, so literally you'd say, and like he who. And then the rest of the sentence is going to tell you who the who is. So you'd say, kasher means like the one who. Probably the best English way to say it. But that's really, idiomatically, that's not going to work. Shamu. It comes from Hebrew shamem, that's in the Cal Perfect. The Cal Perfect of shamem, it's where we get the English shame, but it means much more than that. It's a whole spectrum of meaning, like most Hebrew verbs. At one end, it means that you are the one shamed. But at the other end of meaning, it means how people react to you. And here we're looking at how people are reacting to. It's going to end up meaning Christ in a minute. Shamem means, it's in the booklets and stuff like that, the lexicons, you'll see it means desolated or appalled, devastated, deserted kind of concept. Horror is really what's essential to the verb. And here it's us, because it's in here it's us being appalled at him. We're depicted as being part of the group that's actually seeing him at the time. So, you'd say the ones who are appalled up at you, might be a good way to put it. They who are appalled up at you. And where I'm getting the up at you is aleka. Al is the Hebrew preposition for looking up or up. It's really got the root idea of the smell of the smoke of the sacrifice going upward. And it ends up meaning above. And as you can tell, al is the root prefix for God. So again, as in 52:13, Isaiah is making sound play on the sounds of God. He made it in Yarum with Yah, and now he's making it in al as a preposition. He uses this preposition a lot in this chapter. The ka ending, ale ka. Ka means you. Okay, and it's second person masculine singular, and the you in view is Christ. So we got kasher, okay, like the ones who, shamamu, and then that's really us, and he's making play on that because the mu suffix is also often used for first person plural, but here it isn't. But the sound is the same, or similar. And so kasher shamamu, shamu, aleka, okay, so like the ones who are ashamed up at you. Aleka, ka meaning you. Rabim is simply the word for many people. It's translated the many, and that's not a very good translation. It means the masses. Okay, the human race. It's usually talking about a particular group of people, but the wider and root meaning of it, especially here, is everybody. Everybody who will be present at the time of the crucifixion, and this is what this verse is going to be getting at. And here's how you know. Remember I said that ka means like and, it's setting up a comparison even as. That's the first of a pair of kas in here. The second one is called ken, and that's really ka also. Okay, ken mishchat. Ken is the comparative, and that's the second of the pair of kas. Mishchat is a noun, and as in Greek, in Hebrew, when you switch to a noun, it's stronger drama. Instead of depicting this as a verb, Isaiah switches to a verbal noun, which is mishchat. And mishchat specifically means that his face is so beaten to a pulp. It's in the third, it's masculine singular construct. It means that the face is so beaten to a pulp it doesn't look human anymore. Okay? Ken mishchat, so disfigured. The disfigured in English is too tame a word. So beaten to a pulp. Meish. Okay, meish. Ish is the word for man. Basic word for man. Me is preposition min. It always means separated from, beyond, away from, after. And is famously used with mibeten. Beten means womb. So whenever you see mibeten in the Hebrew, it means apart from the womb, separated from the womb, born. But it's always mistranslated in the Bible as if it were still in utero. So here they translated it rightly, however, to say meish means beyond human. So it's disfigurement of face beyond human. Mishchat, disfigurement of face, beyond. Meish, because it's concatenated with ish. Meish, beyond human. Mishchat, disfigurement of face. Meish, beyond human. Beten, beyond womb. Okay? Meish, beyond human. Alright? Marehu is yet another noun. And it means a sight, something that you see. Like in English we say we're going to see the sights. Okay, so it's a sight, the appearance, looking at, what do you see? Okay, so it's mishchat meish marehu, disfigurement of face beyond human sight. Sight, beyond, let's see, the better way to do it in English would be the sight is beyond human, disfigured beyond human, beyond human. Okay. Mishchat meish mereichu. Better translation. Beyond human, disfigured sight. That would probably be a slick way to translate it. But the word disfigured in English is too tame. Okay. Wator lo. Watoaro, Watoaro, Mib any of them. Okay. Toaro, Toar means, it's really a word for the incarnation. Literally it means form or shape. It's talking about, again, the sight, what you see. Okay, the O suffix means that it's third person singular. Wa, of course, is our friend and. Watoaro mib eni adam. His body, okay, and his body out from the sons of men. Mib eni, again, born from. Mib is the birth prefix, preposition. Mib eni adam. Beni, of course, is for sons. And Adam is the word for man. It's also Adam's name. That's why it's called man. Okay, Adam doesn't have the dagish in it, so you have to say it like DTH. Adam. Not Adam. Adam. Okay, so Kasher Shamu Aleka Rabim Ken Mishchat Meish Marecho Watoaro Mib Eni Adam. Isaiah's contrasting the irony of here he is, the guy who came down, that was in verse 13, who comes down, Avdi, my slave son, who is God, comes down, who's going to be raised up. Well, yeah, this is how he's raised up. He's coming down in order to get beaten up for us. It's really violent. And I want to show some stylistic things that Isaiah is doing in 52:13 and 14, because he's setting up the rhetorical style for the whole chapter. It's so phenomenal, the genius here. So if I get all excited and emotional, just ignore that. When he says Hine Yaskil Adi Yarum, when the Sawa Gavach Meod, that's verse 13. He's doing a pairing, okay, because it's God-man. Just like the sacred tetragrammaton, YHWH, that's a concatenation. That's two. Okay, YH represents the godness and WH represents the humanity, because the YH is from Haya. He's playing, Haya, he's playing on, well, the sacred tetragrammaton is playing on nouns and verbs, because Haya is the verb to be. All right, but Ha is the Hebrew definite article. And so Ha-Yah, the God, because Yah is the prefix for God. You see the wordplay? If you don't know the wordplay in the Hebrew, you miss the doctrine and the cleverness of it. Okay, so Ha-Yah means to be, and God always was. All right, Ha-Yah, the God. Okay, you could also say, all right, in sound, and So Isaiah's playing on this here. And then Hawa, it means to become. That's the WH in the sacred tetragrammaton. And Hawa, the becoming. Are you getting the play with those sounds here? So Isaiah's taking advantage of that. And that's what caused me to understand what the sacred tetragrammaton meant. Because scholars have got all these commentaries on it, and they go on and on and on. Oh, what does this mean? Well, one thinks it's this, one thinks it's that. And really the solution is to look at how the verbs are, and then think about them as nouns, and then go to look elsewhere in Scripture to see if that's being played on. And it is. It's being played on right here in Isaiah 52:13 and 14. 52:13 sums up, as it were, a divine decree, okay, that there will be this slave son. All right? And so the way the decree works is like the way the sacred tetragrammaton works in pairs. Because the sacred tetragrammaton is essentially a pair of verbs. He who always was becomes. Ha-ya plus ha-wa. Oh, golly, I'm sorry. It's just so exciting because the genius of it is unbelievable. Okay, so look. You've got several pairings going on in 52:13. You've got Yaskil and Yarum, both beginning with the Yod, all right, which is the idea of Yah, all right, and you've got it flanking Avdi, slave son. Is that clever or what? And then, okay, this is even more interesting. Yaskil, of course, is the Hifil imperfect, and Yarum is the Kal imperfect. So you've got two imperfects being used. Now, the imperfect tense is used of God to denote that he had no beginning. There is no completion to God. So when God says or thinks a thing, that's a completion. But when you've got verses that are about God himself, they end up being used often in the imperfect to denote timelessness. The imperfect is often used to denote the timelessness of God. So here you've got the timelessness of God plus the two yods flanking Avdi. I mean, could you ask for more clever wordplay than this on his God-man nature? I don't know how. Okay? And obviously Yaskil, being Hifil imperfect, is the slave son is caused to be prospered by means of God's knowledge. I hope I'm getting this point across. Okay, then we go to the second pair of verbs in 52:13, which of course is what Nisa and Gavach. Okay, those are both in Cal perfect. Because why? Because the humanity will be completed. The perfect tense in the Hebrew always denotes completed action or action that's contemplated as completed given the context of the what the verse is about. Here it's contemplated because it's 700 it's about 700 BC when Isaiah writes, maybe a little bit earlier than that, probably a little bit later. It's during the time of Isaiah's lifetime. I know they say there's 3 Isaiahs, well, they're flat wrong. And you can tell that by the continuity of the text from Isaiah 1 to the end. Okay? The meaning, the continuity of the meaning. There's a continuity of meaning. There's a continuity of reference. Okay, it's the same author writing all 3 because you can tell that. The fact that there might be style differences and other things like that is just due to the richness of the way of expression. Anyway, in the second set of verbs, you got 2 Cal perfects. Well, not Cal perfect, I'm sorry. You've got 2 perfect tenses. The first is a Nifal perfect, which means the humanity being carried, lifted, taken up. Okay, and of course that's what gives rise then, sorry for the pun, to the next verb, Gavach, okay, will be glorified, exalted. Seated at the right hand of the Most High being seated at the right hand of the Most High. Are you getting the pun here? So now you got 2 Cal perfects. So you got a pairing of, 2 perfects. So you got a pairing of a Nifal perfect and a Cal perfect. Nifal being Nisa and the Cal being Gavach. And then you've got that offsetting, not offsetting, but pairing with the 2 paired imperfects of Yaskil and Yarum. So you got the Ya prefix plus the imperfect denoting divinity with Abdi smack dab in the middle of them. That's just like YHWH sacred tetragrammaton. Okay, and then you have the Hawa portion of the sacred tetragrammaton stressed in Nisa and Gaveh, which are also paired. All right, so and John does the same thing in the Greek. I don't know if it's Hebraistic or native to the Greek, but John does the same sort of tic-tac-toe pairing in John 1:5 through 10. But I cover that in my translation that's still not done of the Epistle of 1 John. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make here, I just hope I'm getting it across, I'm too excited, is Yaskil and Yarum represent the godness. And that's why they're in the imperfect tense, and that's why you got the Ya prefix sound being used, versus other words Isaiah could have chosen to say the same thing, with Avdi smack dab in the middle. That's in the first clause. And then in the second clause, you've got Nisa and Gaveh, all right, in the perfect, with the first being Nisa, because obviously the humanity gets it done to him, because if he uses his own godness to do that, that's cheating. And then Gaveh, of course, is in the Cal perfect, which is what he himself becomes. Get that tied to the WH in the sacred tetragrammaton? Okay, now the second thing I need to say about this is that you've got a high-low. He's building high-low. He's building the circle that I talk about in the divine physics videos. He's building that circle here. 52:13 is the decree. 52:14 is how he goes down to become human and then is beaten down as a human for our sins. So you've got this circle of 52:13 is talking about him being raised up and glorified, and 52:14 is showing him coming down and then being beaten down by the sons of men, even though he's the Son of Man. And that particular term, Son of Man, is only used in Daniel 7:13. The other verses translated Son of Man in the Old Testament do not use the same words as Daniel 7:13. Christ is only quoting Daniel 7:13 in the New Testament. So the Son of Man, from the sons of men, comes down as God, takes on humanity, and then is beaten down by the sons of men, and then beaten down by God to pay for our sins. That's the theme of the whole chapter, and it's a circle. Because he comes down, then he's raised up. So 52:14 closes the circle of the decree. Because that's the second clause, the second half of the decree, that he will be taken down. Where it's kasher shamu shamumu. Isaiah is concatenating a syllable there, so it's kasher shamu aleka rabim ken mishchat meish mareichu watoro mi adam. All right. In those three clauses, you have the coming down. Shamimu, we're looking up at him being put down for us, but he's also up on the cross, and then he will be raised up in the resurrection. Okay, so, and then Isaiah switches to nouns. Shamimu is the last verb he uses. That's also in the Cal Perfect. And then he switches to nouns, verbal nouns, which in Greek drama, but also first, I guess, in Hebrew, maybe it was true in Greek drama back then too, you have verbal nouns having a higher dramatic value. My pastor stresses that a lot in Isaiah 53:3. So it is a definite feature of the Hebrew language. Because with respect to the word hadar in Isaiah 53:3. So, I think it's 53:3, it might be 2. But anyway, the point is that he's switching to verbal nouns and he's pairing them still. Okay, so you've got mishchat mareichu. Those are the paired nouns. Notice they both begin with M. That's preposition min. That's birthing. That's the second major theme he uses throughout the epistle. Because him being birthed as human, coming down, being hit down by the sons of men, birthed from the sons of men, meish, okay? He thus births salvation for us on the cross. The cross is depicted as a kind of pregnancy. And I'm going to be getting to that later on in the chapter. Okay, so now more and more detail on 52:14. Kasher shamu alecha rabim kemishchat meish mareichu. See the switch? Meish mareichu. So mishchat meish mareichu. See the emming? He's using the emming. He's going to play on Yah. He's going to play on Al going up. Okay, because Al is also a prefix for God. Here the Al is used with the ayin. But, of course, in Elohim, it's the Aleph. But the sound is very similar. Okay? And that's why Al is used for above, too. He's going to be playing on that. So we've got, the pairing is still continuing. Shemimu is the last Cal Perfect. It's pairing to the whole clause of 52:13. And then you got Mishchat Meish Mareihu. Shemimu Mishchat Meish Mareihu. See all the M sounds? Okay, that's for the birthing preposition min. Min means separated from, away from, beyond. And every time you see mi betin or merekim in the Old Testament, it means separated from, beyond, born. Okay, but unfortunately it's always translated as if it were in the womb or just merely from the womb without you getting the sense of it being birth. And that's why Christian pro-lifers are always so confused, because they're looking at the translations rather than the original Hebrew. My pastor taught about the origin of life beginning at birth for 53 years. If you want more on that, I think you should go to him. Anyway, so, kasher shamemu, shamamamamamamamama, shamemu, aleka rabim, b'mimimimimimim. Okay? Kimishchat, meish, merehu. Okay, so you've got the two paired verbal nouns, mishchat and merehu. And then, otoaro, alright, that's still talking about birthing, because he's got a body now. Otoaro. Mib eni Adam. Again, the M sound. Mib eni. Beni means sons anyway. And so he's sort of stressing that. Okay? And born from the sons of men. Alright? I mean, I don't know if it gets better than this. He's pairing up the up, down, so you've got the rhetorical device of a circle going, being exalted on high, coming down, going back up again. Alright? You've got the rhetorical device of being lifted up, raised up. That was in Nisan 52:13. And then he's continuing that circle and the coming down by showing the worst part. Because mishhat is an extremely violent word. It means beaten to a pulp. So that he's up there on the cross. My pastor said this so many times. He's up there on the cross and his face is so beaten you can't even tell it's a human being. They tried to kill him by beating him up before he even got to the cross, so he couldn't pay for sins. That was Satan's objective. Okay, so people were given urges to beat him up more strongly than even the Roman stone and bone would have required. Alright, so that's what mishchat is emphasizing. And the M sound is to show that the beating up, that's really akin to a kind of violent raping. The mishchat, alright, meish, merehu, mib'eni, alright, toaro. So that's how you can tell he's emphasizing the WH part of the sacred tetragrammaton. The becoming, this is what he becomes. He who is highest becomes the lowest in order to be raised up, wanisa, lifted up on the cross, then lifted up to God in resurrection, to be glorified above even all the angels, and that's in Hebrews 1:3. Onoma means the person, and therefore the name in that verse. The final big important thing to notice about this for the outline of the chapter is that Isaiah parses his meter to display certain doctrinal truths. It's just really shocking how he does this. I go through this more in the poetic translation in the Isaiah 53 trans HTM page. He uses 9 syllables, 8 syllables, and 7. And sometimes you're going to have to elide syllables in order to fit it. And when you do that, you see significance, actually, too. But we're going to be getting into that at times. He uses 9 syllables to illustrate Trinity. He uses 8 syllables to illustrate God's will with respect to Christ and his humanity. And he uses 7 syllables to illustrate Christ's perfection. And it gets to be very climactic when he does that, as you're going to find out later on, because what he does is when he uses the 7, he uses the 7 in triplets. Again, illustrating Trinity, the whole idea that, like the sacred he uses in the Old Testament, where, each is God, but they are united in what they think. They have the same attitude, the same ruling on everything, total rapport, same nature. That's what echad means in Hebrew anyway. So, you're going to see all this illustrated in the Hebrew by the way he parses the meter in his verses. So now let's look at how he does that here, because he's setting up the pattern here. Okay, let's look at 52:13 again. And you have, okay, so going back to 52:13, alright, you have okay, now count it out. Hine yaskil avdi yarum. That's 8. Alright, that's God's will with respect to his humanity. Wanisa wagava ma'od. 8. Again. Now, it's all about his humanity becoming and being raised up. So there's your 8. So it's paired eights. Notice the pairing again in 52:13. Hine gaskil avdi yarum, 8. Alright? Then you have Wanisa wagava ma'od. It's also 8. Now we go to 52:14, and this is where the 9s begin to come in. Okay? So let's count it out. Kasher shamu aleka rabim. That's 9. First clause. Ken mishchat meish marehu. 8. Watoaro mib'eni adam. 9. So you'll notice that 8 is in the middle clause. Ken mishchat meish marehu. Ken mishchat meish marehu. That's 8. And that's happening to his humanity. Alright? Kasher shamu aleka rabim. Well, they're looking up at him, but, you'd be looking up to God anyway. So that's 9. Watoaro mib'eni adam. Trinity's will with respect to him is that he become of the Son of Man. Again, Daniel 7:13. Can Isaiah make it clearer than this? I don't know how. I've got to pause here and talk about a Bible rhetorical technique to display divine authorship, which I like to call threading. You're going to see some pictures of weaving looms and the weaving process. Now you'll notice that in those pictures, there's a machine on which thread is strung, one thread at a time, across the loom. Okay, but that means you have to have a loom. Now, if you're going to do the same kind of thing with words, which is what the Bible actually does, each writer weaves all the old words to the new words he's writing to demonstrate he's getting them from God. If you're doing that with words in your head, then if it's flawless, the only one who could be enabling that to occur is God. I mean, it's hard enough to do it with physical thread. And the Bible's got, millions of words? So, for a person to be able to do that kind of weaving with words in his head, right off the top of his head, because all these guys are giving their prophecies or, writing their books, whatever, straight onto the paper from their head. To do that would require divine power. So to me, you can't really test for God's existence except by recourse to whatever book, claims to be from God. So if it was the Quran, I would have to look at the Quran and the character of its writing to see the character of the author and to see the internal consistency of the writing compared to the prior Bible books, which the Quran claims to update. The same thing is true, and always has been, the rule for any new revelation from God. In other words, when Genesis was written, Moses wrote the first 5 books, but even with Genesis alone, the word had been known orally prior for what? Let's see, it was 1400 BC when he began writing it. He wrote it for a period, it was 1440 BC when he began writing it. He wrote it for a period of 40 years, the first 5 books. That information had been already known prior to him writing it, so they were able to test what he wrote with what they knew, and then they could go through the internal consistency of the writing to test for divine genius. And of course, he's writing straight from his head onto, whatever medium they used in those days. Probably papyrus, but, the point is that it's not like a computer where you have an easier time of doing this kind of thing, and even with a computer, to be able to thread all those concepts together in a flawless manner would have to indicate divine existence and power. And every writer after Moses would have to take everything Moses wrote and thread, like a loom, all those prior threads of the fabric, as it were, of what he wrote, into their new books. And then the reader is supposed to test the old material with the new material to see if it's divine. And that's been the rule all the time. And that's why certain books that claim to be from God are ruled out, because they don't pass the thread test. And just like, if fabric is poorly made, the threads will not connect. They won't carry through, especially if it's a thick fabric. Alright, so for it to be perfectly woven, it's got to be God. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up here is that Isaiah is going to demonstrate this idea of weaving within his own chapter. And as I just said in Isaiah 52:13 and 14, he sets up the themes and the key words of the chapter. And now it's his task to weave them through. And he starts doing that in 52:15. And it's so phenomenal how he does that. I don't think I can do it justice to explain it, but I first have to tell you about this threading technique. Every Bible writer uses it. It's his job. It's the way he establishes divine authorship for the book. And so that by the time you get to Revelation, John's job is to weave the entire Bible through the book of Revelation, because it's the last book. And he does do that, but, to study it and read it and understand it and see it, you actually have to use the original languages. You cannot use a translation to see this. And I'm going to try to show something of that truth here in Isaiah 52:15. I'm going to show you how he does the threading. And it's a very simple example, and you could always say, just from this verse alone, well, that's not necessarily divine. And yeah, if that was the only verse in the Bible, you could say that. If the whole Bible was just these 3 verses, you could say a really smart human did that. But you can't say it when you have like 3,000 pages of Bible. And you can't say it when you have the New Testament threading back flawlessly to the Old. And of course, if you don't know how to test the threading, if you don't know how to examine the Bible in the original language texts, you're not going to be able to see this. And that's why you need divine power to even read it. Really read it. I mean, you can get surface things out of it even without divine power, just like you can any book. But to really see the divine in it, you need divine power, and God gives it to you directly. Now, if you're a believer, you need to use 1 John 1:9 when you're studying the Bible in order to see this. And you got to do it over and over and over again. Just because you get God's brains doesn't mean that you can be slothful. You have to have all the discipline of an academic. This is very much a scientific process. Okay, you have to test it. There are all kinds of rules that you have to look for and follow. You have to know the grammar. You have to know the use of the definite article, especially. You have to understand rules like how the tenses work and when they switch. Tense switching is real important. Tracking prepositions is real important. So you see, you have to get those abilities. Now, God supernaturally enables you to learn it a lot faster than you would humanly. And he enables you to know where the dots connect. Like when you're reading a verse, he'll recall to your mind some other verse that has the same keywords in it that applies to the verse you're reading. Okay, so let's look at Isaiah 52:15. in front of you, you'll see the screen of the verse. I'm just going to read it right now so that you get familiar with the words. Ken yazeh goyim rabim alai, yikpitzu malachim pichem, ki asher lo supar lechem rao, wa asher lo shamu hitpunanu. Now, you're going to see in front of the screen a little chart. You can download the chart. It's in the video description. Just click on it. And the rest of Isaiah 52:15 will be covered in 3 more videos. It took too long. So download the chart and look at it. Okay. With that in mind, we're going to now look at Isaiah 52:15. He's threading now the third comparison. Remember we saw Kasher Shamemu Aleka Rabim Kemishchat Meish Marehu. You had the Ka and the Ken. That was in 52:14. He's bringing now a third Ken. Ka and Ken are really the same word. The noon gets inserted depending on what's the next word. Alright, so you've got Ka, Ken, and Ken between 52:14 and 52:15. So when he begins 52:15, I should just tell you what it says first. Here's the verse in Hebrew. Ken yazeh goyim rabim alai, yikpitzu malachim pichem, ki asher lo supar lachem rao, wa asher lo supar lo shamu hitpunanu. Okay, Ken means like. Yazeh is the Hiphil imperfect of Nazah. Goyim, of course, means the peoples. Goyim Rabim, it's really an idiom for all the Gentiles. So you got Goyim Rabim. So now this verse is talking to you about how the Gentiles are affected by what's going to happen to the future King of the Jews on the cross. Okay, Ken Yazeh. Yazeh means to sprinkle, or Nazah means to sprinkle. And it's a technical word that's used for sprinkling on the mercy seat that was in the temple. Once a year, you'd have the Day of Atonement, which we today call Yom Kippur. Yom means day. Kippur is sort of an anglicized pronunciation for covering. Okay? So, Ken Yazeh means, and just as he will be caused to cover, sprinkle, atone for. It's an idiom for atonement. Goyim Rabim, the Gentiles. Alai. Now, Allah, that's the preposition Allah again, and that means going up. It specifically derives from the smell of the sacrifices, the rising of the smoke. And it's a sound play on El, for, the prefix for God. And it's spelled with an ayin instead of an aleph, but the sound play is the same. So, alai means to go up. Alright, it's an ayin, lamed, yod, vav in spelling, with the vowel points being the two, the A sounds. with a segol. Now you've got the next, okay, so that's the first clause, and then you've got yikpitsu. Okay, that's cal imperfect of kafas, and it means to close or to shut. And then you've got malachim, which is kings. Pichem is their mouths. It's in the plural. So yikpitsu means that they will be shutting their mouths in amazement. You're going to see the translation on the screen there. They'll be shutting their mouths in amazement. Kings will be shutting their mouths in amazement. And again, that's why it's in the cal imperfect. Now notice, okay, wait a minute. Okay, malachim pichem, and then you've got the next clause, which is ki asher. Ki is because. Asher, here it's accented on the last syllable. Asher means who, which. It's our relative pronoun that we saw back in 52:14. Lo is Hebrew for not. And then super, this is a really clever word. You see the dagish in the P there? The P looks like an upside down G, capital G. You see the dagish in there? That makes it hard. If you have an F sound without the dagish, and it's a P sound with the dagish. So the dagish being that little dot. Alright, super is a really important word to talk about because it's talking about an accounting. It's an accounting term. It comes to mean recounting a story where you're trying to get the facts in order and tell it in a way that makes sense and fits together logically. So it's talking about he, because, that's the key, he who, asher, lo, not, recounted, super. He who is not recounted. And it's in the puel perfect, which is really important. The PL is an intensive stem. But this is puel, which means it's passive in that they're receiving a recounting. Alright? It doesn't mean, you've heard of the Sefer Torah and all that, the book. But this is the verb. So it's saying he who was not told to them. That's usually the translation. But told is really not the right way to translate sapar. Super. Because safar is talking about an accounting. God wants you to understand why. He wants, everything about God makes sense because he's ultimate thinking. So when he accounts himself to you, and here it's the accounting of Christ, to the Gentiles, when he does this accounting, he makes it make sense. And what he's basically saying here is ki asher lo super, those who did not have Christ accounted to them. Lachem, they will, to them, they will see. Rao. That's from Ra'ah. That's in the cal perfect. So let's go back through that again. Ken yazeh, just as he who is going to be the meaning of it, just as he who is caused to sprinkle, atone for, goyim rabim, the Gentiles, alai, up to Father. Alright? Ken yazeh goyim rabim alai. Yikpitzu, malachim pichem. Yikpitzu will be shutting up, in amazement, the mouths of kings. So in English, in good English, you'd say the kings will shut their mouths in amazement. Ki asher lo super, because he who was not accounted to them, lachem, to them, they will see. In Hebrew, you've got to stick the to them in front of the see. He's actually using it that way to stress it. Alright? So good English would say, Ki asher lo super, lachem rao. Okay? He who they did not know, because he who they did not know, or he who was not accounted to them, they will see. Because rao is in the cal perfect. It means it's a completed. They will come to have seen him. Alright, now let's go through the last clause. Wa'asher lo shamu. hitbunanu. Okay, lo asher, wa asher, and he who, lo shamu. That's also Cal Perfect. Lo again means not, no, not hearing, not listening to, not obeying, not heard of, really, is what's in view here. Wa asher lo shamu, hitbunanu. Okay, hitbunanu. Okay, shamu, I better cover that first, is the Cal Perfect. He who they did not hear of. Who they did not listen to. Who they did not obey. Shema means all those things. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad is the famous Deuteronomy 6:4 command to hear God. Okay, well, they weren't hearing him. They either weren't hearing him because he wasn't explained to them, or they weren't listening when he was explained to them, and even if they were listening, they weren't obeying. So it's got the semantic range of Shema has all that in it. And here Shema is in the Cal Perfect third person plural, which is why it's Shamu. Okay, and then the last word in the verse is hitbunanu. Hitbunanu. It's from bin, B-I-N. That's a yod, for the I. And it's got the dagish and the B. Okay, this is in the hith polel. Alright? And it comes to mean cause to intensively understand. It's got, the hith polel has the concept of being caused. It has the concept of intensiveness of the PL. And it has the concept of reflexive, or most especially passive, where you're getting it done to you. Alright? So bin means to understand, consider, perceive, be prudent, or regard. Here it's talking about understanding, because it's in parallel with rao. Okay, in the previous clause. So hitbunanu. Now, let's read the whole verse in Hebrew again, and then I'm going to go through the threading. Ken yazeh goyim rabim malai, yitpitzu malachim pichem, ki asher lo supar, lachem rao, wa asher lo shamu, hitbunanu. You see the paralleling between hitbunanu, which is being caused to intensively understand, and rao, which is to see, look at, inspect, but it's in the Cal Perfect. Now, before we get into the meter, I want to show you the threading. The first instance of threading, there's so much threading in here, it shocks me. The first instance of threading is in Ken. First word in the Hebrew. That it looks like a dagger with a mouth open. All the Hebrew letters are mouth pictures. Each Hebrew letter is basically telling you how to pronounce the letter. Okay, so you've got this open mouth for the K. And then you've got this dagger-like thing for the N, because your voice is going down at the end of it. Because it's a final noon. Okay. Now, Ken is the third one. We had Ka and Ken in 52:14. Now we've got the third one. Again, play on Trinity. In Ken. Yazeh, alright, is again Nazah. That's in the Hifil imperfect again. And that is a technical verb for atonement. Sprinkling. That was what the high priest had to do on the mercy seat once a year. Okay? So that's how he sprinkles, as it were, atones for the Goyim by means of what's going to happen to him in 52:14. Which was the, Ken mishat me yishmerehu, v'toaro me eni adam. Alright, being, sacrificed. Being beaten to a pulp and up there on the cross where everybody's seeing him. Okay, so as a result of that, just as Ken, Yazeh, he will sprinkle, atone for, while he's up there. Okay, he's up on the cross. In that manner, he's also atoning for Goyim Rabim, the Gentiles. Aliyah, that's what's telling you that it's an atoning, because Aliyah is going above, going up to. It's going up to Father. The smell of his thinking on the cross is going up to Father, so to speak. And that's the atonement for the Gentiles. So it's not just the Jews who are being atoned for. The Gentiles. I mean, you're either Jewish or non-Jewish. So that's everybody. I wish the Calvinists would pay attention to that. But anyway. Okay, Yikpitsu. Okay? They will close, these are the kings, they will close their mouths. Now see, you'll notice that this is the next clause. Alright. So we got Ken being threaded down to the prior two Kens, that's Trinity. And then again, you've got the hypostatic union, which was already paired, being referenced as a whole via Yazeh. Alright? Because that's sprinkle, that's atoning. And then it's obviously talking about atoning up to Father. So now you're talking Trinity. Because human thinking alone can't do that atoning. But we're going to talk more about the Holy Spirit later. Goyim Rabim, alright, is, newly introduced here. Alai. Now, Goyim Rabim is a kind of pairing. I mean, it's sort of stretching it to say that. Because you have the Jews being depicted in 52:14. And so now the Goyim are brought in. But that's not really a hypostatic union pairing, but it is a pairing of two kinds of people. Alright, so then we get to Yikpitzu Malachim Pichem. Now, they're closing their mouths. The kings, they shut their mouths in amazement. That's a parallel and a pairing to Shamemu in 52:14. Remember how it started out? Kasher Shamemu Aleka Rabim. Well, now the Rabim are the Goyim instead of the Jews. Okay? And instead of Aleka, it's Alai. And it's Yikpitzu Malachim Pichem. The Malachim in view here are the Gentile kings. Okay, they're shutting their mouths in amazement. So they're not at the cross. They're later, they're after. And they're shutting their mouths in amazement at finally seeing this happen. Alright, so you got Shamemu in 52:14 of the Jews watching him be on the cross. Now you've got Yikpitzu in parallel, alright, of the Malachim Pichem. They're shutting their mouths at the story of him being on the cross. Okay, Ki asher lo supar lechem rao. Okay, he who was not heard of, who was not recounted to them, they see. Yeah, they see him. How are they seeing him? They're seeing him in their minds. They're looking at him in their minds. They're looking at him through the story being told. The story being recounted. Okay, it's not just a simple telling of a story. It's explained, it's justifiable. It's an accounting story. Okay, that's what Sefer means. Safar, rather. Alright? So then you get to, so that, you got a parallel. Remember, it was Marehu in 52:14. Ken mishat meish Marehu. That's a seeing. That comes from the same verb, only it was turned into a noun in 52:14. Okay, Marehu, the sight of him. Hu is the third person singular suffix. Okay, so Marehu is now paralleled with Rao, now used as a verb. Isaiah switches back to verbs in 52:15. Alright? And then you've got your last clause, Wa'asher lo shamu hitbunanu. Alright? Shamu is hearing. Now that was what I was trying to say in 52:14. Instead of saying shamemu in 52:14, it's concatenated into shamu. So now you've got the same sound, shamu, here in 52:15. Lo shamu with shamemu. Okay, shamemu were appalled up at him. Well, we're not hearing the meaning of what he's doing. So we're appalled, we're horrified. And it's got a negative connotation in 52:14. That we're not only appalled at the sight of him in 52:14, we don't want him in 52:14. And that's really the whole human race. The Jews just happen to be the poster boy in the verse, but it's all of us. We're appalled at him. We're horrified at the idea of him. So it's negative and horrified, like, compassion. And it's also horrified as in desolate. Okay, so Isaiah is paralleling that here in 52:15 with the sound shamu, to hear, to listen, to obey. Lo shamu, not hearing, not listening, not obeying. Wa'asher lo shamu, the one who we didn't listen to, we didn't hear, we didn't obey. Hit punanu, now understand. And it's true that the Goyim Rabim, the Gentiles, are in view here. But again, the poster boy was the Jews in 52:14. The poster boy is the Gentiles in 52:50. You see how he's doing the pairing still? He's paralleling, and paralleling is a feature of all literature, good literature. But with Isaiah, it's got this God-man stress. Because, of course, this is a stress on his humanity. We're hearing about him, seeing him. And so he's now pairing the peoples. First the Jews, then the Gentiles. And he's pairing the concepts. Hipunanu is paired with Rao. And of course, Rao is paired with Marehu. It's threaded down from Marehu in 52:14. And Shamu is threaded down from Shamimu in 52:14. Okay, and you'll notice also there's so much pairing that goes on here. It's like, how do you do this off the top of your head? Okay, you got bin, which is to understand, and that's also, a pairing off of Rao to see, because you're seeing with your understanding. Okay, and then you've got Asher paired again within 52:15. Ki Asher lo supach lachem Rao. Okay, Asher, and then Wa Asher lo shamu hitpunanu. So you got the two uses of Asher. Yeah, he who is God, he who is human. Alright? And then hitpunanu is also being paired with supach, because an accounting and an intensive understanding go together. And so you've got an accounting, supach, Rao. Of course, Rao would be the result of the accounting, and then hitpunanu would be the result of Rao. So, I don't know, maybe it's stretching it, but he's sort of doing a sort of Trinity play there. Because first there's an accounting, then there's a seeing. That might be more hypostatic union. First there's an accounting, which results in a person being seen, God taking on humanity. And then hitpunanu, we are caused to intensively understand by means of the Spirit. But I'd have to think about that more, because I don't want to stretch the meaning here. There's a very definite Trinity meaning that Isaiah means, and I'm not sure if that's one of them. So now we're going to go through the meter. The meter is just completely shocking to me. Okay, so we're going to start clause by clause. Okay, 52:15 meter. Ken yazeh goyim rabim alai. You're going to truncate the alai, because the W closes your mouth. Alright, the Vav ending closes your mouth. That's 9 syllables. Ken yazeh goyim rabim alai. See, that's 9 syllables. Yikpitzu malakim pichem. That's 8 syllables. Ki asher lo supar lachem Rao. 9 syllables. Wa asher lo shamu hitpunanu. Now that ends up being 10 syllables, so it's got to be elided somewhere. So the probable place to elide it is going to be to take out the wa, washer, like that. Washer, sha, washer. Let me say it better. Washer lo shamu hitpunanu. That makes it 9. The reason you can do that is that the wa, of course, is a vowel sound. All right. It's a consonant, but it's got a vowel sound to it. And Asher, that's the Aleph. Asher is spelled Aleph. Well, you can see it there. And the two naturally would elide together. So it'd be Washer lo shamu hitpunanu. 9 syllables. So this is what's so shocking. You've got Ken yazeh goyim rabim alai, 9 syllables. Yikpitzu malachim pichem, 8 syllables. Ki asher lo supar lachem Rao, 9 syllables. And then another 9 syllables. Wa asher lo shamu hitpunanu. So you've got 3 9s there. That's Trinity. You've got an 8 in the middle because it's talking about the reaction of the people. And God's will for Christ is that the people, right, know Him. See Him. Yeah, they're shutting their mouths because they see Him. And He's depicting the kings because if it's the kings, it's going to be everybody else too. The king owns the kingdom. In the old days, the king actually owned the kingdom. All right, he had the rights to all the people. They were all his property. That was the concept in those days, and actually, it's the eternal concept too. You're going to see that when we get to 53:12. So, do you see that? It's 3 9s with an 8 in the middle, and the 8 is of kings. And when you get to 53:12, that 53:12 is going to thread the Malachim, because there's a Wa'etatsumim clause in 53:12, which is making kings. So the king makes kings who shut their mouths and then are made kings themselves over other people by the time you get to 53:12. Okay, and then there's more paralleling that's being done. Let's go back. Yazeh and Yikpitzu are in the imperfect, Cal imperfect for Yikpitzu, which is Kafas, in the Cal imperfect. And then Yazeh is the Hifil imperfect of Nazah. So you've got the two imperfects being paired, first of which is in the Hifil, and then you've got the Yikpitzu and the Cal, but they're both in the imperfect. So you've got something causative, which results in a reality. The causation, he's caused to atone for, and then they see that, which is the Gal coming up later, and as a result, they shut their mouths in amazement. Now, that brings up the next pairing of we're looking at the tenses. Okay, then everything after Yikpitzu is in the perfect tense. So you've got Super, alright, that's Puel perfect. The Puel, again, is the passive of the PL. PL is the intensive stem. And then you've got Rao, which is the Cal perfect of Ra'ah, to see, look at, inspect. So you've got perfect, two perfects there. And then, of course, in the last clause, Kesha lo shupar hem Rao, wa'asher lo shamu, shamu is in, again, the Cal perfect, third person common plural. And then hipunanu, which is in the Hifpolel, perfect. So you've got all perfect tenses following the imperfect of Yikpitzu. And that's pretty much everybody's reaction. Is you shut your mouths in amazement, either amazement negative or amazement positive. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 perfect verbs, perfect tense verbs, following the 2 imperfect tense verbs that began the verse. Every letter in Hebrew stands also for a number. Numerology in Hebrew is not like the stupid Bible codes thing. It's a way of communicating truths, Bible doctrine. And so when Isaiah uses a meter, he's not just using it to be poetic. He's communicating doctrine. That's why I'm trying to explain that 9 is Trinity, 8 is God's will for Christ, and by extension to us, because we all get sewn up in him. That'll be in 53:5. And so when you have to pay very close attention to pairings or triplings or quadruplings, and here we're talking 6. 6 is the number of man. All right, it's the Bible doctrine number of man. 7 is a Bible doctrine number of perfection. I wrote a webpage on what the numbers mean in mirroring.htm. You can just search on Brainout and mirroring.htm and you'll find the page. Numerology is important in the Bible not because of the goofball use of it that we see so commonly on the internet, but because it communicates doctrine in numbers. Alright, so here the numbers are important. Everything in the Bible is important, and so when specific number patterns are used, they're important. Sometimes they're symbolic, but more often they're doctrinal. In fact, every time they're doctrinal about some kind of principle of doctrine. Alright, so here you're looking at 6 verbs being used. There are no nouns being used to communicate verbal action. Whereas in 52:14 we saw him switch to nouns. Here he's talking about verbs. And he's using 6 of them. And every one of the 6 verbs is an impact on mankind. That's why there are 6. You see how these little things help you understand how to rightly divide the word of truth, how to understand what God is trying to get across? By using the numbers, you know immediately that mankind is the recipient of this. I mean, you could tell it even from the translation, but you see it much more clearly that it's a deliberate purpose. When you see stuff like the fact that he's using 6 verbs, the fact that he's using 3 clauses of 9 and 1 clause of 8 that has to do with kings, okay, since the King of Kings is the one going to be doing this, it helps you know how to interpret the passage. And that's real important with respect to Isaiah 53, because I have never seen so much goofball stuff on this chapter on the internet. I can't even believe that people can come up with the interpretations that they do. It doesn't mean Israel. Israel's the recipient. Israel is not the suffering servant. And the people coming up with that goofball idea, I don't know. He was supposed to be their language, but they sure don't know how to read it. Because look, Ken yazeh goyim rabim alai. That's third person singular yazeh. The same person who was in 52:14, who was beaten to a pulp, appalled up at you. And the people who are appalled are the Jews in 52:14. The people whose mouths are shut in 52:15 are the Gentiles. So how can Israel be the suffering servant? It's Christ. Duh! Was Israel put up on high and beaten to a pulp so that everybody, that fellow Jews are looking at them? No. The people being beaten up and the people doing the looking at the one being beaten up can't be the same people. Alright, so you got Ken yazeh goyim rabim alai, yikpitzu malakim pichem, ki asher lo shupach lechem ra, o asher lo shamu hitpunanu. Alright, so you've got 6 verbs, meaning mankind. Okay, you see before you something I've been working on, golly, gotta be 5 or 6 years, to get a translation of Isaiah 53 in English that matches his Hebrew meter. The purpose of this video is to explain that translation, because it's very different from what you'll find in English Bibles, but it should be close enough to what you find in your favorite translation that you can follow along. I'm going to explain the Hebrew versus the English so that you know where I got it. It won't be, an over-taxing explanation. Hopefully. If I sound, I had trouble talking, it's because I'm excited. This really means a lot to me. So, if you don't want to listen, just turn it off. Okay, let's first just go through the structure. Okay, if you want to see this better, let's show you how to see it. When you download, you've got this document, it's 2 pages, it shows the whole chapter in English, and to see it best, just use Word and get to print preview. I'm using a version of Word that's before 2007, and in print preview, as you can see, it shows the whole page, and then if you scroll the wheel of your mouse, the second page occurs. So you scroll it back away from you in order to see the first page, and you scroll it toward you to see the second page. Now, I'm not going to use print preview to show this document because I need to highlight the words. You can't do that in print preview. Alright, so we're going to go back to the edit mode. And I want to show you this first column is the verse that you can find in your Bible. The second column is the number of syllables in Hebrew, and that really matters because Isaiah tracks history by clause, just like Moses does. And I'm going to do more videos on Psalm 90 to show you how Moses is also tracking history by clause. This is the secret to Bible Hebrew meter that the scholars do not know. They just met in Rome. They have an international symposium every year. They don't even know or agree that Bible Hebrew has meter because they don't know its rules. And they don't know its rules because they don't understand the doctrine that God orchestrates time. That is a doctrine Christianity does not know. It's newly being explored now, but it's being explored by apostate pastors who write books and make money, and they're doing it wrong. Alright, so I'm going to show you how it is done. You can proof all this yourself. And, take it where you will. Alright? Verse. Syllables. And you'll be able to proof these. Alright? Here's the translation in English I came up with using the meter. I'm not always happy with the translation, as I'm going to explain. This last column is the cumulative total, because I want to show you, as I've shown you in previous videos, that this is the ending of a paragraph, and it's divisible by 7. That's the rule that Moses follows. That's the rule that Isaiah follows. So other writers and other chapters of the Bible will follow these same conventions because Moses set the standard and Isaiah's following it. But I'm using Isaiah first because it's Isaiah that caused me to discover all these rules. Alright? And so see, it's divisible by 7. The cumulative total is 77, corresponding to David's age. Okay, and I keep a running tally. This is going on with the verse. That's 133 syllables, 168, 203, and then this is the rest of the chapter on the second page. See, cumulative 259. So that tallies to the videos you've seen. Alright? It should, because I proofed it before I started to show this. Alright, and again, you can download this Word doc yourself from the video description. Okay, let's go through the chapter. In Hebrew, Isaiah 53 starts here in Isaiah 52:13. That's indicated by what's called a samex. It looks like a leftward facing mouth with your tongue up. That's an S in Hebrew, one of the kinds of S's. It has 3 different kinds. And that samex marker marks the end of 52:12, and that's why we know this is a new chapter in 52:13. That's very common knowledge among the Jews, but it's not common among Christians. Alright? So this is where the chapter really starts. So this is why we know how many syllables to count. The first verse has two clauses of 8 syllables each. And the first verse I translated like this: through truth my son prospers, rises. Okay, these words, through truth, that's not really the whole of what the Hebrew verb yaskil says. That's from sakal. That means to have skill as a result of knowledge, to have skill in using truth. It literally means a mastery of the truth through which you have prosperity as a result. So to translate that in English, I had to use this word here, through truth, and prospers. Whereas in your English translations, it usually says something really insipid like, my servant will act wisely, or my servant prospers. That's not what the Hebrew is saying at all. It's talking about through truth. Now we know the Lord became the way, the truth, and the life. This is where they get it from, Isaiah. That's where that statement in the Gospels comes from. That's why the Lord says that about himself. Because he did master the truth so much he became it. In his humanity, not just in his deity. Alright, now the word here translated my son is avdi, and the E sound means my. Okay? And that literally means slave. But you have to understand that in Hebrew culture, and in many other cultures, Greek also, the son, the chief son, the number one son, is called a servant. It's a sign of his heirship. Alright? You are a slave to your father until you prove worthy of your father, and then you inherit, and then become, as it were, adopted as a son, as well as being a son maybe biologically. The Romans in particular use this. Alright, so I translated it my son because that's who is in mind here. Alright? Now the word rises is yarum, and it means, it doesn't just mean rise, but it ends up having that connotation. It means to rise up in life. It ends up meaning to be princely or lofty, but it's something you do that results in you being high. So that's why I'm translating it this way. This is technically the hifil, which in Hebrew is a causative voice. It means that you yourself cause or something else causes it to happen to you. But usually if it's something else causing it, then that's used as the nifal, which is a different stem. But this is hifil. Yeah, this is hifil. And this through truth prospers is also hifil. So they go together. In other words, what this verse is saying is through mastery of truth, prosperity results, and also he rises. Now, rises is meant to be a play on the ascension. Rises is meant to be a play on being raised up to pay for our sins. Rises is meant to be a play on resurrection. That's why I'm using the word here. Okay? Now we get to the second clause. And carried, exalted, greatly. Now your English Bibles use those words. So I don't really need to say much except that the actual Hebrew is dramatic like this. Okay? It's using just two verbs, and then this word greatly here, ma'od, it really means vehemently, violently, violently. Okay? And, in other words, sudden, sharp, shock, fast, huge, shockingly great. Shockingly great. Not just great. And I advise you to look up the theological workbook of the Old Testament to see them talk about this word ma'od. M-E-O-D. The D has no dagesh. Alright? The O, M-E-O, the O is really an aleph with a little O dot underneath it. Okay? So that ought to be pretty clear in translations. I don't really need to explain that. Carried is nisa, and it means to carry. It means to be carried or to carry. It's in the nifal. Exalted, gavach. G-E-V-B. It's spelled with a B, but it's got no dagesh. A-H. Okay? And that's exalted. So most of your Bibles translate that correctly. Alright, now we gotta get, and that's 8 syllables. Okay, now we gotta get here. Just as people appalled up at Hineh Yas Kil Avdi Yarum Wa Nisa Wa Kavach Ma'od Kasher Shamemu Aleka Rabim Ken Mishchat מאיש מרעהו ותוארו מבני אדם. כן יזע גויים רבים עלי, יקפיצו מלאכים פיכם, כי אשר לא סופר לכם רעו, ואשר לא שמעו התבוננו, מי האמין לשמועתנו, וזרוע יחוה על מי נגלת, ויעל כיונק לפני, וכשורש מארץ סיה. לא תואר לו ולא חדר ונראהו ולא מראה נחמדהו, נבזה וחדל אישים, איש מחובות ודוע חולי, וכמה סתר פנים ממנו, נבזה ולא חשבנו הוא. אכן, חוליינו הוא נשא, ומקרובנו סבלה, ואנחנו חשבנו הוא נגו מוכה רוחים ומונה, והוא נחולל מפשענו, מדוקה מה עוונו תנו, נוסח שלומנו עלי, ובחבורתו פלנו, כולנו צאן תנו, איש לדרכו פנינו, ויחוה הבקיא בועט אהרון כולנו.
ניגס, והו, נענה. ולא יפתח פה. כזה לטבע יבל וקרהל לפני גוזיך נעלמה ולא יפתח פה. מעוצר ומשפט לוקה ודורו מי שוחה כי נגזר מארץ חיים בשמי נגלה מו. ויתין את רשעים קברו ואת אשיר במותי אל לא חמאס עשה ולא מרמה בי פיו. ויהוה חפץ דרכו החלי אם תשים אשם נפשו יראה זרע יעריק ימים וחפץ יהוה בידו יצלה מעמל נפשו יראה ישבע בדעתו יצדיק צדיק עבדי לרבים ועוונתם הוא יסבול לכן אחלק לא ברבים ואת עצומים חלק שלל תחת אשר הרע למות נפשו ואת פושעים נינה והוא חטא רבים נשא ולפושעים יבכי.
I'm going to try and read Isaiah 53 live.
Now I'm gonna screw up on the meter, because I memorized it before I knew the meter, and I'm sure my memory of it is going to interfere, but I'll try. And I'm also going to sort of screw up on some of the vowel points because they're really dinky tight, and sometimes I read them wrong as a consequence. Okay, let's see. I'm putting this on the screen here. It's not working. Okay. I'm going to try and look at it to remember the vowel points. הנה, ישכיל עבדי ירום, ונשא וגבח מאוד, כאשר שמעו עליך רבים, כמשחת מי ישמעו, ותוארו מבני אדם. כן יזה גויים רבים עלי, יקפיצו מלאכים פיכם, כי אשר לא סופר לכם רע, ואשר לא שמעו התבונן. And I'm one of them. מי חיימים לשמועתנו, וזרוע יחוה, על מי נגלת? ויעל כיונק לפני, וכשורש מארץ צייה. לא תואר לו, ולא חדר, ונראיכו, ולא מרא, ונחמדיכו. מבזה חדר אישים, נשמע כחובות, ודוחו לי. וכמסתר פנים ממנו, נבזה, ולא חשבנוכו. חוליינו הוא נשא, ומה קולנו? סבלם. ואנחנו חשבנוכו, נהגו, מוכה, רוחי מונה. והוא מחולל מפשענו, מדוקה מעוונותינו, נוסח שלומנו אליי, ובעבורתו נרפלנו. כולנו כצאן תנו, איש לדרכו פנינו. ויחוה הפקיבות עבור כולם. ניגס והונעני, ולא יפתח בי. חסר לתהר יובל, וכרחל לפני גוזזיך נעלם, ולא יפתח פיו. מעוצר וממשפט לא כאן, ותורו מסוכה, כי נגזר מארץ חיים, נפשה מנגלמו. וייתן את פרסיים קברו, ואת השיר ומותי. אלו חמאססה. ולא מרמה בדיוק. ולכו חפץ דחו החרי. אם תשים שם נשו. יראה זרע יעריק ימין. וחפץ יחווה. בידו יצלע. למען נפשו. יראה. ישמח. בדעתו יצדיק. צדיק עדי לרבים. ועונתם. הוא יסבול. כן. החלק לא ברבים, ואת עצומים לחלק שלל. תחת אשר הרע, למוות נפשו. ואת פושעים נמנע, וחוך את רבים נשא. ולפושעים יפגע. רני, הקרא לו ילדה, פיצי, רינה, וצחה לי לא חלה, כי רבים בני שומם, מבני פאולה, אמר יחווה,